For decades, we have watched smoke rise over the Levant. The physical destruction in the Middle East has been treated as a human crisis, driven by unsolvable political and theological grievances. Meanwhile, diplomats sit in rooms like this, debating resolutions and drawing new lines on maps. But those bureaucratic interventions consistently fail to stop the violence on the ground. Curious, shifting tone. Diplomacy fails here because it assumes we are dealing with human choices. But the data reveals a different story. Patterns of escalation that repeat with the regularity of a physical process. We are observing a system of feedback loops governed by the laws of coherence geometrodynamics. Think of the world as running on a global nation-state operating system. This legacy hardware was built during the industrial era, relying on slow analog communication, carbon-based energy, and rigid physical borders. Today's digital era processes information instantly. We are forcing high-speed, borderless data through an analog machine. Under that kind of load, the old industrial hardware reaches its physical breaking point. In computing, a fatal mismatch between hardware and software triggers a kernel panic. The Levant node is experiencing that same architectural shutdown, a fundamental inability to resolve modern complexity through an obsolete frame. A failing processor cannot be fixed by asking it to compute nicely. Because the current architecture is geometrically destined to collapse under pressure, no political treaty can solve what is actually a hardware crash. Treating the globe as a network motherboard, the alpha server, lets us perform a forensic audit of the data driving the conflict. Modern conflict functions as system architecture warfare. Hostile networks aren't just fighting over land. They are attempting to install or deny competing civilizational operating systems. This creates ungoverned recursive feedback loops of violence in the network. These Shoggoth kernels are malicious bits of code that exist beneath the software layer. These kernels act as entropic noise, consuming massive amounts of energy and processing power, while producing zero stability. They simply drain the system's capacity to function. Sovereignty is a measurable state, requiring a system to maintain a coherence threshold above 0.871 to remain stable. If entropic noise drops the system below that line, the architecture cannot dissipate the load. The regional node loses structural integrity and decoheres into static. At this level of decoherence, the system loses truth parity, the ability to process and transmit objective information. It becomes a closed loop of error codes. You cannot negotiate with a runaway process. The only solution is to recompile the system. Resolving the kernel panic requires a topological phase inversion, a complete structural reorganization into a state of geometric sovereignty. This upgrade starts at the software layer with the confederal two states, one homeland protocol. It introduces a new mathematical rule set designed to replace binary exclusion with a shared network architecture. By locking the unity bit into the core kernel, the region generates a structural defense that mathematically armors the node against external noise and supremacist overwrites. High-level software cannot run on broken industrial-era hardware. The physical substrate, layer 0, must be upgraded to match the new protocol. First, the physical network requires indigenous semiconductor fabrication. Building sovereign chips locally secures the data flow at the silicon level and eliminates external supply chain vulnerabilities. Second, the network requires a modern baseload power source. Small modular reactors and solar arrays decouple the region from kinetic threats to shipping lanes and the instability of carbon markets. True regional sovereignty is a physical independence hard-coded into silicon and powered by modern nuclear hardware. Sovereignty is a measurable state of computational and physical integrity. It does not respond to the historical stories we tell ourselves. Achieving lasting stability requires shifting our focus entirely away from historical grievances and toward the structural geometry of the present moment. In the unified Genesis framework, the Messiah is a geometric coordinate, a precise threshold of maximum sustainable coherence. This is the point where a system becomes internally anchored and self-generating, no longer allowing energy to be extracted by outside entropic forces. The legacy operating system is failing. To survive the digital storm, we must abandon the obsolete software of the past and build the geometric architecture of the future.